And I'm live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. You'll have to excuse the laundry. I didn't know I was gonna, film right now. I decided to do it, so I'm doing it. Now, I want to talk about Nazarite versus monk. The word Nazir in Hebrew is also the word used for Buddhist monks, Christian monks, people of different sects, and well, such types, I suppose, other religious, people in monasteries, that kind of thing. People who devote their lives, who dedicate their lives, in their own fashion, whatever, according to that faith or religion. And is the Nazarite a monk? So it's interesting how, well, let's look at it this way. The hair aspect we know from the Zen Buddhists or Buddhists. I don't differentiate. I'm ignorant. But the act of shaving one's head to show purpose, right, and to shed worldliness, and the I don't know of any such thing with the hair with Christian monks, right, friars, nuns. But if anyone wants to fill me in, not nuns, well, yeah, nuns. Then please fill me in. There is. I know the Franciscan monks. I started to get to know a bit just from reading. Haven't conversed with any, but I like Saint Francis's kind of premise, let's say, because I don't know anything in depth. So, the monk is seen as this hermitic kind of creature, human. I say creature, I mean someone outside the norm, someone who's not necessarily a part of society, community, right? To be separated, that's what that is. Since these individuals separate themselves in their own ways for that calling which they feel, that makes them, well, monks. And is the is the Hebrew Nazarite a Jewish monk? I think the answer is no. Although there were Nazarites who were more hermitic in their nature, I'm sure, the Nazarite is not commanded to shun all worldliness. Although you can make the argument that what is laid there in the vow is a foundation on which you have to build to get there. One of the Nazarites that I'm in touch with, a gentleman from New York, he believes this to a degree, that there need to be things that come on top of that, which the vow doesn't necessarily, specify explicitly. Things that are more implicit and which are subjective to the person. For instance, I can see the logic in that because when I took my vow, gradually I also stopped drinking all alcohol. Well, no, that happened at one time, wine, grapes, and alcohol. But and I also took on veganism as opposed to vegetarian, which I was before, and that has to do with that. For more info on that, see my previous videos on it. Maybe I'll link them somewhere. So this idea of separating yourself for a higher purpose or a purpose, you're the one who knows how high it is for you, and it's the people or the market who would attribute other kinds of significance to it. You know what it means to you. Anyone who takes that road of separation, I mean, more so than the run-of-the-mill individual would, because we all go through that separation, being one with our own existential, crisis going on here, or existential conundrum if you're not anxiety prone. The point I'm trying to make is that even though it's all individual and it's a lonely and intimate path, there's something about monks, Nazarites, people who separate themselves that I guess makes it more pronounced for them. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that it's made it more pronounced for me. A while back, years ago, when I went to therapy for a few years after the birth of my first kid, and at some point, my therapist, who was amazing, thank you wherever you are, she said, you need to find a group. And she didn't mean in a religious or spiritual way at all. She said just maybe take a class. I was very lonely. I had no friends. It's a different video. Now I have. And she said you need a group, something you can call, a collective, us, we, our. And I gave it a lot of thought. I didn't decide yay or nay. I could see where she was going with it. Nevertheless, I think the Nazarite, in some ways, for me, it's become more pronounced. I don't know if I will ever find a community. My community right now is my family, is my woman, who we're like-minded in some things and not in other things. And, my kids who I'm bringing up in the Nazarite way, but just from my end. Nothing is on them. They haven't taken anything. I don't raise them vegan. None of that. But again, a different video. So Christian monks, right? Nuns, friars, the Buddhists. In Hinduism, well, that's a different kind of vow, I suppose. Right? The Rastas, which take a Nazarite vow. The idea of making a vow. So in Christianity, it's threefold, or in some sect of Christianity, I'm not sure which one, which is obedience, chastity, and abstinence, right? Where poverty. And some take a vow of silence. You can separate yourself in a lot of ways. I think the ways in which the Nazarite separates himself, must be better now, probably not. The ways in which the Nazarite separates himself, if you take the three-faceted Nazarite vow of wine, hair, death, and you equate it, or compare it to obedience, poverty, and obedience, poverty, and abstinence. It's like they're both called Nazir in Hebrew, but they're very, very different. Now, a lot of things in Judaism, right, the Hebrew faith and the Christian faith are different, so why should this be any different? I know, but still, the way that different people take on a vow of separation, this is what they separate from. Some people separate from speech for a limited. I've done that myself. I have taken not a vow, but I have fasted with silence for not extensive days, but a lot of times. I've done this a lot. Not for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, but I've gone a couple of days without talking, or maybe more. Not much more. The idea of separating yourself in such ways, and the Buddhists or the Zen Buddhists, the monks, I know that, I used to know more about them. My mind fails me at this particular time. I used to know more about Buddhism in general. There was a time in my life where I was not practicing ever, but certainly reading more about it, interested more. Um, these days, my Eastern teachings are the Tao Te Ching. That's exclusively, at this point, my teaching, what I read on a regular basis. A lot of Bible and a lot of a different book, and the Tao Te Ching. For intellect and stuff, not reading books, right? Pleasure. That I recently reread parts of Lord of the Rings that I like. I love that book. I really do. I do. Should I be separating myself more as time goes on from worldly things like the Lord of the Rings? A book that doesn't. That's wonderful, but I'm just giving this, as an example of something that could be considered like frivolous, even if it is a book, because you're not dealing with the higher things, the big questions. No, I like my time out. I really do. I like my time of being with my godly soul and with my animal soul. I try to not let it be a competition or a fight. The vow of sexual abstinence, abstaining from sexual, conduct. My grandfather, he recently turned 94. He hasn't said this in many years, but I grew up sort of with this in my head, because it was said a few times that The downfall, he said, of Catholicism, or rather something that would, I'm paraphrasing, but something that they kind of went wrong with is that those with the higher calling, right, the clergy and the monks and nuns and, others of that nature, they vow abstinence and they don't have kids. And that vessel, that body and that soul and mind, it doesn't get to transfer something to the next generation. Like, I mean, de facto, literally, as a child, progeny. He said that, um, well, basically all I remember, but there is something to that. The Nazarite does not separate himself in the Bible. The Nazarite does not separate himself in a sexual way, and I can understand how some would interpret it. Would interpret it that way, and if they feel that's part of their journey, they should go for it. There were people who've been abstinent in the Talmud. We meet one or two or more. I'm not that much of a Talmud scholar, and in the Bible we see Moses who takes a wife and then releases her. Let's say sends her back to her father. And let's not go there, but they exist. So at what point? Well, let's think of it this way: Nazarites, monks, people who separate themselves. There's a lot there. You're devoting yourself to something. It perhaps is more pronounced with something extreme like silence or chastity, obedience, and oh my God, what's going on? It's late. It's very late. And abstinence, poverty, obedience, and abstinence. Am I ever going to get those right? Like in a row? I don't know. There is something amazing about dedicating yourself to something, be it for 6 months, a year, 10 days, a lifetime. There's something, if you do it for a higher calling, and by higher calling, I mean something that you really desire, that you feel a calling to, drawn to, whether physical or spiritual. There's freedom there because you know that you are immersed in something that's like larger than you. Um, there's a lot to that. I don't know a lot or anything about the nuns and monks and friars of the Christian faith or the Zen Buddhists, the Buddhists, monks of um, and nuns of the Buddhist faith. But I kind of know the Hebrew one as I see it. So Nazarite, not Hebrew monk, not Jewish monk. Some might call it that. I see it differently. You're not shunning all worldly possessions, at least not according to the actual biblical vow, but it's supposed to be guiding you with very precise kind of, with this great precision. These things seemingly are not as important as the other three of the Christians or things that the Buddhists take on. But that's why this is a monk and a nun and a friar, and this is a Nazarite vow. Let's have a wonderful night. I hope I didn't ramble too much. It really is late, but I wanted to take a video out. I just felt the need to do that. Let's have a good one.